We have never faced such enemies. The diary of a German admiral after the Battle of the Atlantic. American cargo ships, escorted by submarines and US Navy vessels, were delivering Lend-Lease supplies to Europe and to Russia when several German submarines caught up with the convoy. In the ensuing battle, a Fletcher-class destroyer, USS Keeling, call sign Greyhound, the flagship of the convoy's escort group, managed to destroy several German U-boats. The main storyline follows the struggle between the convoy and a pack of German submarines, a wolf pack. In their first encounter, the destroyer achieved a confirmed victory. An oil slick spreading across the waves marked the sinking. After that, the Germans lost their sense of impunity in the waters of the Atlantic. The story is told from the perspective of a German admiral who miraculously survived and was stunned by how easily the Americans tracked and destroyed them, as if shooting targets at a range. We'll take a closer look at what happened, who's to blame, and what it all led to. Support the channel by subscribing, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share this video. The topic is far too serious to stay silent. I remember that day down to the faintest sound. The storm drove the waves like sheets of steel, the wind screamed through the radio masts, and the sky hung heavy and grey, as if the sea itself had taken up arms. We sailed the northern Atlantic, certain we ruled the ocean. Our submarines formed a wolf pack, the pride of the fleet, the shadow that always struck without warning. We believed no one could challenge us. But that day changed everything. The radio was silent, the airwaves clear, a good sign, or so it seemed. The convoy moved from the west, dozens of ships loaded with Lend-Lease cargo, fuel, steel, weapons, food. We knew those supplies fed the war against us, and every torpedo we fired felt like a step closer to Germany's victory. Everything seemed simple, everything according to the old rules of war. But the Americans no longer played by our rules. They came shielded by escort, thick as armor. Among the grey transports, one silhouette stood apart, a flagship destroyer. Call sign, Greyhound. That was the first time I heard the name through intercepted radio. A young operator said, "Herr Admiral, they're speaking short, clear, with no static." I told him it was just the Americans, better equipment, weaker hearts. Back then I still believed that. We formed a half circle. My submarines waited like hunters beneath the waves. We waited for night to strike. When the sun slipped away, the sea turned blacker than coal, and that particular silence settled, the kind that comes before a storm. We launched the first torpedo. Moments later, a deep explosion rolled across the water. It seemed one of the transports was hit. We cheered too soon. In reply, the ocean came alive, as if the sea itself had turned against us. Their sonar began to sing, not a single mistake. It was as though they could see through the water. We were used to sluggish reactions, to confusion among our enemies, but not this. They moved like one creature. Their captains didn't shout over the radios, they didn't have to. The depth charges fell exactly where they needed to, as if someone above the clouds drew a map of our routes. Klaus's boat went first. His voice crackled over the airwaves. "We're under fire, holding depth, stern damage." Then silence, only the hiss of seawater in the headphones. My navigator turned pale and whispered, "They can feel us." Yes, they could, like predators smell blood. We dove deeper. The pressure rose, the lights flickered, the steel bulkheads moaned under the weight of the ocean. It felt like the water pressed not only from outside, but also from within. Each breath tasted of fear. Above us, the propellers thundered. Somewhere up there, the battle raged. Then, a chain of explosions, one, another, another. The hull shuddered. Instruments clattered from the shelves. That was when I realized the war had changed forever. No more duels of captains, no chivalry, no legends. A new age had begun, the age of machines, cold and flawless. The Americans had merged with their instruments. They could see us in darkness, hear us in silence. We tried to strike again, firing blind, chasing the sound of their screws. But they turned, as if knowing the exact path of each torpedo. Then an English voice came over the radio, calm, without hatred. "You have no chance. Surrender." We did not reply. A German officer does not surrender at sea. When the depth charge exploded nearby, the lights went out. Only the emergency lamps glowed red. The men were silent. The air smelled of oil and sweat. Someone whispered a prayer. That was when I learned that death is not an explosion. It is a slow, endless silence. We survived by miracle, surfacing among wreckage and smoke. Above us loomed that same destroyer. On its mast, the flag of the United States. I saw men on deck. They didn't fire. They just looked down. Between us stretched only water and 1,000 unspoken words. We were enemies, yet I felt something strange. Respect. They had beaten us not with rage, but with precision, discipline, and intellect. Later, on shore, I learned the details. The destroyer had been part of a convoy bound for Britain, then to Murmansk. Its commander was young, newly promoted. They said he was a fanatic for order, sleeping barely a few hours, memorizing every navigation procedure. His crew trusted him completely. That trust, that unity, was their weapon. After that battle, we lost almost the entire group. Headquarters called it temporary setbacks, but I knew it was the end. The ocean was no longer ours. Sonar, aircraft, escorts, everything now worked against us. The Atlantic was no longer the kingdom of fear. It had become a battlefield ruled by technology. Years later, I sat in my office, leafing through the old war journals. Coordinates, names, dry reports. Yet behind every line were faces, men who believed underwater war was an art. But it was arithmetic. We lost not because we were weak, but because we belonged to the past. I still remember that day. The taste of salt in the air, the diesel rumble, the chill of metal beneath my hand. And each time, one word echoes in my head. Greyhound. I thought it was only a call sign. Now I know. It was a symbol. The symbol of the end of the undersea empire. The Americans weren't merely guarding a convoy. They were defending an idea. For them, it wasn't a battle over cargo, it was a fight for the future, for an ocean where darkness would no longer rule. Their resolve didn't shout, it moved. We who lived on slogans couldn't comprehend that quiet strength. I replayed the battle endlessly in my mind. Every move seemed fated. We lost contact when they jammed the frequencies. We missed because they shifted course by mere degrees. We surfaced when pressure became unbearable, and they were waiting, as if we had walked straight into a trap drawn on an invisible chessboard. Young officers later asked me, "Herr Admiral, why did they outsmart us?" I said, because they fight not for glory, but for life. We march toward death as duty. They fought to avoid it. That is the difference. When the war ended, I couldn't look at the sea for years. It became a mirror of defeat. But with time came something else, gratitude. A strange word for a sailor who lost nearly all his men. Yet there, among storms and bombs, I first saw the truth. Power without reason is nothing. Now I am old. Sometimes I open my old naval atlas and trace my finger across the Atlantic routes. Where we once hunted, ships now carry tourists and trade. The ocean lives, and perhaps that is the real victory, when the sea ceases to be a killing ground. I remember the American captain's face. I saw it through my binoculars when we surfaced. He stood calmly on the bridge without hatred, not like an executioner, but like a man doing his duty. I realized I couldn't hate him. He was a reflection of my own youth, only on the other side of the war. We sailors are all alike, no matter the flag. The wind, the salt, and the fear make us the same. Had fate turned differently, perhaps we would have shared a table, recalling those storms as trials, not curses. I often wonder what those Americans felt when they saw a German submarine sink. Joy, pride, or emptiness? Because victory at sea always carries pain, even when you survive, especially when you survive. As I write these lines, the Atlantic murmurs outside my window, the same ocean, only calm. In its rhythm I hear voices, German, English, Russian, all mingling now. Perhaps that's the truth. The sea never divides men into enemies. It tests them all. I've thought long about that battle, why it stayed with me, not because of fear nor defeat, but because that night I saw the human face of war. No slogans, no hatred, just men doing what they must. Since then, I've stopped believing in pure evil or pure good. War showed me both live within each of us. What matters is what you choose when the ocean looks back at you. I lost much, but I kept one thing: memory. Bitter, yes, but better than emptiness. Because while you remember, you are still alive. We truly had never faced such enemies. They didn't shout, didn't gloat, didn't stage parades. They simply did their job, without hatred, with flawless precision. That was their terrible strength. To this day, the hum of any ship's engine tightens my chest. In every echo of a propeller, I hear that night again. And with it, respect. Because an enemy who forces you to become better was never an enemy. He was a teacher. That's how I think of them now, those who sailed under the stars and stripes, who saved their own and drowned mine. We were all just men, cast by the sea into opposite sides of history. And if there is a harbour in heaven, I hope there are no flags, no wars, no hatred there, only the eternal sound of waves and the memory of those who once faced them. When the surf breaks on the shore, I swear it whispers the same word: Greyhound. I close my eyes and see that grey destroyer fading into the mist. It didn't just sink us, it ushered in a new era. An age where war ceased to be honour and became science. It was the beginning of the end, but maybe also the beginning of understanding. That strength without humanity is hollow, that even an enemy can be a mirror of your conscience, and that the sea, however cruel, always returns the truth. That's why I write again, not to recall defeat, but to remember the cost of pride. To remind young officers who believe in invincibility that there comes a day when your enemy is not a man, but an era. And in that moment, it is not about firing first. It's about realizing you stand before change itself. That day in the Atlantic, I lost ships, comrades, and the illusion of immortality. But I gained something far greater: respect for the enemy and for life itself. Now, when the sun sinks beyond the horizon, I watch the light dance on the waves. And I think these are the same waters that once carried us toward the American convoy. Only now they are calm. Perhaps the ocean forgives everyone, even those who once believed they owned it.